So, I guess my biggest problem with the film, and I think probably its most obvious flaw, is something that is a pretty typical Hollywood move, which is whitewashing. Mm-hmm. And I just don't understand why they would have like a pretty much all white cast in Invisible Man.
Right, because it's weird that an adaptation about a novel from the 60s is, Elizabeth Moss is the lead, is Booger. I wouldn't imagine that.
I mean,
or Bigger. Sorry. I get Booger and Bigger mixed up.
Okay.
Another novel.
I mean, you'd think that it being the first film adaptation of a Ralph Ellison work would warrant an all-black cast.
Yeah. I mean, that's when the studio sent me the notes, I was like, good, check.
So you're responsible for this?
No, they didn't give me a casting sheet. I just saw diazepam, I saw Black Cop. I saw like certain things that like you have to have in a movie of this caliber, and I was like, perfect. And then go make it, baby. And then they made it.
I mean, also missing too are a lot of the themes of race relations and the plight of the black man,
the suffrage.
No, and that's wrong.
Well, yeah, you always get. The most interesting thing about that novel was the attempt at scapegoating communism onto black people, and just like so many other minorities, the communism is a label to otherize.
Yeah. The idea that Marxism and communism is somehow associated with these minorities because they live in sort of a lower social and economic strata. So to them, of course, Marxism, communism makes sense, right?
It's the inherent oppressor's fear of being overthrown by the oppressed.
Exactly.
And I thought the film kind of illustrated that enough when, like 10 cops attack this invisible man. And, he overcomes that. And that's the kind of the imagined fear of the self-imposed superior race.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, like, it was a powerful central metaphor having the person be invisible, right? Because what is an impoverished, disenfranchised black man to American society other than invisible?
Right.
So, good things, bad things for sure. Not quite the adaptation that I would have hoped to see, certainly.
But it's good that they tried, because that opens the door for other people to see, like, well, I liked most of the themes, but I felt like we needed to have a more impacting strangling of the daughter scene.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to see more white women being smothered. But, I understand that, we want to be more sensitive in this day and age.
Sure. I mean, we could argue about being true to fiction, right? Or being true to literature. Right. And there's obviously quite a few white women strangled in Invisible Man. And so, it was kind of interesting how they flipped it on its head. And
subverting our expectations.
But overall, the film left me wanting.
Sure.
Basically, is what it comes down to. And I just hope one day we do get this sort of like impactful, impassioned adaptation that Ralph Ellison deserves.
I think we will.
I just hope so.
That was our review. Make sure to like and subscribe.
Yep.
Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Whoa. We ain't talking about Invisible Mans. We're talking about the Invisible Mans.
Oh,
whoa.
Surprise.
We got you.
Fucking dorks.
Fucking idiots. Yeah, Invisible Man, directed by Lee Wanell, probably most famously known for writing the first Saw film, and I think some of the subsequent films after that.
And then also The Invisible Man.
Well, yes, also The Invisible Man.
most known.
Excuse me. Lee Wanell also directed The Invisible Man.
Wrote and directed.
He previously had written and directed a film called Upgrade. Came out a couple years ago, I think. Came out in 2018.
That sounds familiar.
It's about this guy who's like in some. It's kind of Paul Verhoeven-y, kind of like a RoboCop 80s throwback action movie.
Yeah.
Where the guy gets paralyzed and ends up getting like a computer chip implant that controls his body, and he kind of turns like superhuman.
It's not about how when you want to get a new phone, you go on AT&T.com and upgrade. You pay the $200 more.
No.
Okay.
It's not about that.
Because that shit sucks, man.
It does suck.
Those ain't that right.
Yeah, so Leigh Whannell wrote and directed this movie. This movie's part of Universal's like reprisal of its kind of famous Hollywood monsters. The previous film in this franchise, if you want to call it that, was The Mummy.
Right.
Tom
Okay,
Cruise.
so it is part of the MCU, if you will.
So they were actually, with The Mummy, they were trying to establish like a shared universe.
Right, remember that.
Like the MCU.
It was apparently a disaster.
Well, yeah, it was a critical and commercial failure, The Mummy was. So they kind of abandoned that plan, went back to ground, and were like, okay, we're just going to tell individual stories then based on these ancient monsters.
And they never interact.
Right. We're not going to have any kind of like
so there
monster
isn't
team-ups.
Okay, I kind of wish there would be.
It would be interesting.
Like Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah. That's one. I think that might be the next one.
They're still going on with it. I thought that would be just a
They
bad
are,
idea.
but they're not doing a shared universe.
Right. Okay.
They're just doing individual.
I
films.
thought so. Is the Kevin Bacon Invisible Man? Is that a similar like attempt at bringing back?
Well, Josh, I'm glad you asked, because there have actually been a few adaptations of The Invisible Man.
Oh, sure.
Which is an H.G. Wells novel from the late 1800s. That particular film, which was directed by Paul Verhoeven, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, and it's his biggest regret as an artist.
I remember watching that movie like all the time. I was like 10 years old, 11 years old. And I remember just like titties. I remember seeing boobies.
A lot of titties.
And then I remember seeing like a gorilla being like operated on with invisible hands. And I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
It's actually working.
Of course it is. Get cocky.
Heart rate's up. She's scared. It's okay, baby.
Subject began manifesting almost immediately. Protocol is acting quickly.
I love that movie. This is why
Who could dream this up? You know?
Paul Verhoeven.
Paul Verhoeven is who. However, that one's not necessarily considered canon. That's not really associated with.
But it's a similar adaptation.
I think it's just called. I think it might be. What is it called?
Wow, I didn't know that. Very interesting.
Either way, I don't think it's like a canon adaptation of Invisible Man.
Okay.
Because The Invisible Man, I should say, as a story centers around this scientist Griffin, who turns himself invisible.
So it is. The Kevin Bacon movie is the same. That's exactly the premise.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a premise that kind of, but it's not a direct adaptation.
Okay.
In other words, it probably was unlicensed in some way. So The Invisible Man is about this scientist Griffin who manages to turn himself invisible, but can't turn himself back. And he's kind of like this weird sociopathic, violent kind of weirdo who then goes around like taking advantage of these invisible powers that he's recently had. I actually haven't read the source novel, but I'm familiar with the character because he was featured prominently in some of the early League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comics written by Alan Moore, which are awesome. And they're all like faithful adaptations of these particular characters: Alan Quatermain, Griffin, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And he's a total psychopath in that. So anyways, my point in bringing this up is that the original story centers on the scientist.
Right, I was going to say, this movie doesn't seem to be doing that.
No, this movie centers on the scientist's wife, abused wife, played by Elizabeth Moss. GF, sorry. Yeah,
I don't know if they're married.
I don't think they're married. And she is actually the central focus of this film, not the...
Ooh,
that was a weird one.
That was a tough one.
It took a little while to get out.
Stream.
Yeah, so it's based on the girlfriend and not the eponymous Invisible Man. And so that's like one of the major departures from the text here, among many.
Oh, really?
But I would say that is the
also,
major
there's black
departure.
people in this movie.
I know.
Which is not, I'm sure H.G. Wells never envisioned black people.
No.
At all, in any capacity.
So yeah. So what did you think of The Invisible Man?
Well, okay. So the first 30 minutes, I was kind of fully on board, and
The title sequence for this movie,
you loved it.
awesome. I loved the black waves crashing
I did
against
like
the
that.
rock and the water cascading down and illuminating the credits. I thought that was a very nice touch. It felt kind of like classic and very cinematic to me.
Yeah.
And you have this like lonely house up at the top of the mountain with the windows illuminated.
Adrian. He was a sociopath. He said that I could never leave him. He controlled how I looked and what I wore. Then it was controlling when I left the house. And eventually, what I thought.
It also sets the tone for the first, I'd say, hour of the movie, where it's really letting you. It's just like those long takes or those long shots where you kind of are like expecting to see something, and the film doesn't necessarily like force you into seeing something. This is like a traditional horror thriller. The way it's marketed, it's like this big, like you're gonna be shaking in your seat. And the opening of the movie was not what I was expecting, because it was very not quiet because the waves were so loud, but it was very simple in the language of the background of the cliff and then the waves. Yeah,
I liked that diegetic sound coming in of those waves crashing. It kind of made that whole
kind of like
first
Roma.
scene pretty intense. Cut.
So the first 30 minutes, I was fully on board, and then I think the movie kind of just said, well, we did market it as this big budget, scary flick, and we have to kind of just do it. And the movie kind of not lost me, but I just, all the beats started happening, and I was like, okay. So ultimately, the movie isn't great, but I still enjoyed it, and I felt like I was kind of paying attention the entire time, which is good considering what I was going into thinking it wasn't going to be great. What do you think?
I agree. I really liked the opening. I thought that the whole scene of her kind of collecting her belongings and doing like tense. It had some interesting cinematography, like how the camera was focused on her, and then it does this almost like 180 pan to this darkened hallway. Maybe there's some suggestion there of like, oh, she's heading into, the darkness, into the blackness.
It made me question, because I think that's after she goes down to the lab to like turn off all the cameras.
Yes.
And it like kind of pauses on the room where, the Invisible Man is, because there's nothing there, and she kind of stares at it like, it's like, I know what's there.
It's kind of like a ploy that the film employs several times throughout.
Yeah. Just empty space and like imagine.
Which you as the audience, you're looking at, you're like, what is that hairbrush going to move?
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Exactly.
So
waiting for the displacement of air, and it really kind of makes you work to see something.
It's a decent technique to build tension for the movie, which I think for the first probably half of the movie, we don't see much of the Invisible Man. We see her escape. We see her get to ultimately her friend's house. This police officer, James, who kind of takes her in out of the goodness of her heart and lets her stay there because she's been severely abused, apparently, by this genius scientist researching optics.
Well, we're skipping over a part where she does escape. She is running through the woods waiting for her sister.
We talked about that. That's the
well,
beginning.
I just wanted to talk about him, Adrian,
yes,
running out of the woods, like slamming into the car. There's two elements. There's one of the, like, we already know that we're going to get an Invisible Man because we've seen the trailers, or on every single platform in the world is like, a little blanket lifting up in there, like, oh! And then there's this menacing element of this just huge, fast man running at you and punching a window. And it's like two disparate elements of like unseen horror and then just like clear. I don't know. To me, just like, I wasn't really expecting that going into the movie either.
Sure. Yeah. I think
abusive man.
One of the focuses of a lot of the reviews of this movie is about how it's more a movie about the trauma of abuse,
sure,
and the ripples that come out of that. Right, that particular part that you're talking about, I thought was well done. Again, there was tension, and then she's sitting in the passenger side, and you just see this dark figure run out of the woods, punch it, And then
because you're waiting for that the whole time she's running away. You're like, okay, when is he gonna?
It delivers
wake up?
on that promise,
especially when she gets the alarm to go off. It's like, oh shit, she's got to go, and then
but
it's still it set it up and then it delivered.
Mm-hmm. And then I actually liked the scene where he reaches down to grab her pill bottle and the blood's just dripping off of his hand because it's kind of like he could fucking care less about the fact that he's bleeding right now.
Yeah, he's already formulating a plan.
Yeah.
As he's picking up the bottle.
Adrian's dead. Listen, you're getting your freedom back, okay?
He said that wherever I went, he would find me, walk right up to me, and I wouldn't be able to see him. Adrian is dead. He's not dead.
So the first half of the movie had like these kind of interesting elements that, from reading some reviews, I kind of expected, but didn't overall expect from the movie, like from the trailers and things like that it is about this woman's trauma. So I thought it was interesting, but ultimately I thought it was kind of a failed experiment. One thing I wanted to ask you right off the bat is, do you think that this is, I mean, in your limited experience, obviously, an accurate representation of trauma, of abuse, and of like how that might affect someone?
I don't know. I do know that it's a pretty accurate description of gaslighting.
Yes, I would call this gaslighting the movie.
Which is yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think Hannah leaned over to me and she was like, just I don't know what point, but she was like, I think Elizabeth was like, I'm not crazy, and she
Who's
goes,
Hannah?
Just a friend I made at the movies.
Oh,
just a good friend.
Cool. I mean, I'm glad you made a friend. The guy next to me fucking hated this thing.
What a douchebag. But she leaned over and she goes, gaslighting, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty much this is a movie that kind of plays with the idea, I guess, the tension, the entertainment value from just a pure audience or like moviegoer perspective is like, how can like the tension is coming from like she's put in situations where she obviously looks guilty, and we as an audience know, we're told multiple ways that she isn't guilty, but you know the characters are reacting, and so it's like it's kind of fun engaging with that.
So well my question was going to be is like the hysteric woman trope that it employs of her going around being like, you must believe me,
right,
trust me, and everyone's like, I don't know about that, young lady.
Well, I think the first time I had a problem with it was young lady. She's at an old folks home.
Yeah,
that'd been a good set piece.
Would have been, yeah.
So she's I think playing, she's like wrestling with her friend's daughter,
the man who's
James's daughter, who's they're living with,
and who she has just gifted like a college education, and gifts for
because Adrian killed himself.
Adrian killed himself and left her money, which she
killed himself.
Right, he killed himself, which she takes, which is sort of like, I don't feel like the movie dwelled enough on that moral choice that she made of like, this man abused me to the point that I escaped him barely, and yet I'm also willing to take this money from him. Is this like, does she feel like this is her reparations for dealing with this? I don't know any other word to use.
That's okay. That's fine. No,
compensation.
I thought about that too. I thought, like, you know, is the movie trying to say that, you know, fuck this abuser, if he's going to kill himself and put her through even more trauma by having to deal with that? Because, like, you know, if someone kills himself who does a horrible thing to you, or they die before their, like, kind of justice is paid upon them, you know, that kind of leaves another, like, ghost to deal with.
And history is rich with examples of people who have died before they've been brought to justice. Yeah. You know, and it seems like in the lives of the survivors of those people who survived those people, that death feels unjust.
Right.
You know, that if nothing else, that limits the closure that they can have on it to a certain respect.
So the movie might be saying, you know, fuck this guy for doing this to you as well. Take the money. I don't know. You're right. It doesn't dwell on it long enough. I did wonder, this might be just a nitpick and maybe a continuity error, but I mean, she's emphasized before she gets the note, like the summons or whatever, that no one knows she's there.
Yeah.
And then she gets an unmarked letter, or just a letter addressed to her.
That wasn't sealed.
I was like, I leaned over to you. I was like, there's going to be notes throughout this whole movie. I would have loved that. I would have loved, like, just like clues she has to figure out. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have.
Well, they updated that with a little modern flair by having it be an unknown caller text message on a cell phone.
Surprise.
Those are the notes that were left.
So I thought the movie was kind of like, saying that people are looking for any sort of way to kind of feel justified in the things that they've gone through. And $5 million, it kind of seems like wish fulfillment, where it's like, I went through this trauma. I wish this would happen to me,
and now I can live comfortably, treat my friends well.
Maybe it's just a plot device.
People who rescued me, I can rescue them.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like
it wasn't really a plot device because it didn't play into the rest of the film.
He has figured out a way to be invisible.
My reason for this line of questioning is because I have a statement that I'm going to make that's going to sound really bad on paper, but I don't mean it in like any kind of an edgelord way, which is that this movie should have had more depictions of abuse. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I grappled with at first, of like, okay, cool, I actually like the choice that we don't see the abuse, because how many times in film do we see women getting beat up?
Or the trope of like, she's like showering and she's a flashback to like a la Big Little Lies, like where she's getting choked or something in the shower.
Right. But what that did is it kind of neutered the whole central conceit of the film, which is that this woman is severely traumatized by the abuse she suffered at the hands of this man. But we never see it, so we can't fully invest in her trauma, because, I mean, it's one thing to just be like, well, we know she was abused and we need to trust women, which is true. There's so many examples in history of women not being believed, right?
Name one.
And so that was in my mind as well. Okay. Like, women obviously deserve to be believed for these things, but this is a movie, and we're an audience that needs to have some context for what's going on. And so I felt like we needed to have at least some idea of the severity of the abuse that she suffered at the hand of this guy. Because what it did is it made him as an antagonist, as a villain in the movie, I questioned his motivation all the time. I didn't really understand why he was so obsessed with her, which the movie also kind of asks that question, never answers it. But as such, he just wasn't menacing.
Sure.
He was invisible, sure. And I guess that's unsettling. But beyond that, I don't know anything about this guy. What he's capable of.
Your hair's lifting. I wish I had the editing capabilities to just lift your hair.
You should lift it and say that Addison's hair had to go back to its home planet. That's a Simpsons reference.
Do one of those that's a bit more dead inside, like he doesn't even have anger, he's just dead.
Still rolling, and
3, 2, 1, go.
Well, I think you and I are having the similar problem, but I think maybe for different reasons. I thought the abuse, maybe there could have been more instances of it. I don't know, because they do fight. And it's weird because it's invisible and she gets lifted in the air. But the scene where she does escape and he charges down at the car and punches the window in front of another person kind of shows me the extent to which he would be willing to control this person, to control Cecilia, C, as James would call her.
Everyone called her that.
Everyone knows her first name.
So even the guards in the hospital.
Yeah, they're just like, Cecilia, don't do this.
She shifts constantly, and she's been there for like 24 hours.
This isn't you, Cecilia. I'm still thinking about the abuse thing, but for me, the problem with the movie was it felt like it shifted too hard into the, like, we're in the world of this invisible person being real. Like, where it has this weird technology with these cameras or these mirrors.
I guess spoilers. This whole thing has just been spoilerific up to this point. I don't even know that we need to call it out, but...
Well, we don't spoil, like plot points, though.
Besides the money, maybe, but yeah.
Oh, because he killed himself?
Yeah.
Whatever. Spoils.
I think that's also in the like synopsis for the film. I think it's kind of known that he kills himself. So,
okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, so the movie the first half of the movie is a lot of sequences where she feels like she's being watched. She's kind of processing this trauma of, like, he manipulated me for however long, I'm assuming years, making me think that, I can't escape him, and that when I finally do, he'll always be around. I think that's pretty well established, and the movie does a good enough job of kind of continuing that tension of her, like she just turns around and looks centered down a hallway and thinks that someone's there, and they probably are, but we don't see. So I think the air of living with this abuse is there, and I think her continuously being kind of rattled by that is probably enough for me. I don't know how I would get it. Is, I guess, the main problem with your point. I understand where you're coming from. Like, we need to feel more like invested in their relationship.
Allow me to continue.
Okay.
So I'm not saying I didn't buy Elizabeth Moss's performance in this. I felt like she at least adequately portrayed what it would be like to be a woman who lives with this trauma of an abusive relationship. But what it does, we don't see that. What it does is it completely kills the final scenes of this film, where they are reunited and they're sitting across from each other. And I never got a sense from that guy that he was menacing really in any way. And I feel like if it had been more clear what role he had played in it, did he actually just set up his brother for that final confrontation? And then also, what was he capable of in the past besides like running out of the woods and punching a window? I feel like that last scene would have been more impactful.
Yeah, I thought the last, I guess that last scene was pretty, not anticlimactic, but like there's so much like tension throughout the movie in each scene that it felt like kind of flat.
Yeah, there was no chemistry between the characters, first of all, to where we could see maybe how they had potentially like gotten along in the past.
Adrian's a bad actor.
But really bad
face actor. I don't know about voice. He seemed fine enough when he had.
He said surprise. That's basically it. That's all he ever said.
But like him in that dinner sequence, it's like, his deliveries are so weird. He's like, I'm just a good guy, and and
he was not ominous in any way. Like, I wasn't like, oh shit, what's he gonna do?
And maybe the film was trying to illustrate that, like, these abusers, are remorseful, and
see gaslighting. Like, I get it. I understand.
Sure, okay.
I understand. Like, maybe what they were trying to go for.
So what I wanted from this movie, this is what I wanted, and I think there might be a problem with it though. I wanted us as an audience to not know if the Invisible Man's real. And I wanted a little blurring of like when, spoiler, fuck you, she is having dinner with her sister, and the knife's just floating there, and she slices her throat, and then it whips right into her hand.
Yeah,
that's good. But I also didn't want to. I wanted to be constantly questioning, like, wait, is she imagining that like someone is floating or has holding a knife next to her, and then she, like kind of basically what a crazy person would say.
But see there, I think then this movie would turn into something perhaps problematic.
Exactly. It's
right?
Like, oh, we're kind of we are just creating a crazy woman,
mm-hmm.
and the movie doesn't get resolved in any sort of meaningful way. I felt like the movie was kind of stuck between those two ideas.
I think this movie was stuck between a lot of ideas, which goes back to what I said, that I think this is a failed experiment that had good intentions. It definitely did.
The ambiance was good. I thought the music was too much. There were certain moments that I liked, but the cinematography was good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I love those, like I said, those shots where it's just empty space and you have to kind of imagine. He's there. Like, it's really creating this air of like, oh my God, there's somebody there, but you can't see it. No one else can see it, and you're just like, am I going crazy? Like, thinking that there's a person here.
I've never felt the weight of an empty door frame in a movie before, like I did in this one. Where it's like, is he standing there? Is he watching?
The threshold is massive.
Yes, and so I agree that this was a movie that was competently made, and there's
that word.
What?
Remember, I said to you before this movie, this is gonna be a competent movie.
I don't remember you saying that.
Oh, absolutely.
That was an original idea.
Is such bullshit.
Courtesy of me.
And an invisible person can be scary because it is the unknown. It is kind of like darkness, it is death. You just can't, you don't quite understand it. And you don't know where it's at. What is fear to you then? You want to get into that? Because if like shit is moving around, but I guess if it's an invisible person who's just like chilling, who's just like, you know, reading a book,
just peeping on some showering ladies,
rocking on the chair. Yeah, it gets to the point where
you just wanted to watch Kevin Bacon's Invisible Man. I think is what
I would have loved that.
Mains prep.
There was nothing.
That for Matthew. The honor was mine.
See, I don't feel like an invisible monster is all that scary, because what it comes across as, despite these actors' best efforts, is just kind of fucking goofy. Seeing them like slip and slide around in the kitchen and get thrown places, and I don't know. It kind of
that you're right. You're very right about that. Fighting with an invisible person is not that scary.
It's or interesting,
really.
And again, despite these actors' best efforts, because
it's like they'd never watched Lord of the Rings, and they're like, "Whoa, it's cool if there's like an invisible person fighting a real person." Like, come on, we've seen it before. What is the gimmick, and why are you pushing so hard for it? Why did we have so much? We had a whole like 5.5 minutes of this guy mowing down all these cops in a hallway, and it's like, whoa, where is he? Like, we kept getting that over and over again. It's like, yeah, not interesting.
And those were the most boring scenes of the movie for me, hands down. The best stuff in this movie were the more quiet moments, her escape from him, her, like not being able to go get the mail, things like that. Yeah. Those were the moments where I actually felt something. But as soon as Invisible Man came onto the screen, I was like, okay, yeah, let's move this thing along. Let's get him out of here so we can get back to this woman dealing with her trauma.
I see what you're saying. I agree with that. I just think that the idea of someone being right next to me and could potentially do harm to me is kind of terrifying.
And those were the interesting scenes, but it's when he's actually let loose to...
Oh, I see. So a monster who is like a traditional monster who is like doing harm, and
I mean, because we're dealing with
fighting somebody
with like a classic monster here of the Invisible Man, in line with Frankenstein and the Creature from the Black Lagoon and all of these things that are meant to be scary. And yes, the unknown, like the scene where he pulls the covers off of her and you see the feet implanted on the sheet as she's trying to pull it and she can't pull it. Good scene.
Yeah, right.
Good tension.
I thought it was a little too early. If I had to pick when they do that, I'd think like we wait another hour. an hour and 20 minutes.
Humbly disagree with you on that hour thing. The structure of the story I thought was kind of messy too, as far as like when she first goes to his house. I was like, oh shit, are we already at the climax?
Well, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. But I thought it was kind of, he was going to bring her back. I was expecting that.
I thought that this whole thing was for him to subtly manipulate her, to gaslight her into coming back to the house where he could lock her in,
right.
And
make her think that she needs to get back. That's why I thought
the final showdown.
Yeah, the messages. I thought there was going to be more like kind of clues and like more manipulation. The manipulation's pretty straightforward, where it's just like make her look like she killed people.
Make her look like she's crazy, like she's another hysterical woman.
And maybe that takes work. I don't know.
It certainly does.
Men, we just do it naturally. So it's like, if you're thinking about it, it becomes difficult.
Right. So right.
Are you okay?
He's sitting in that chair.
Well, I guess this is probably a good point then to bring up another thing that's been kind of, I think, an object of derision among people who have seen the previews, which is the acting in this movie.
Oh, there's derision.
There is. People who have watched the trailer have been kind of like, that looks fucking stupid, because...
I was one of those.
Yeah, Elizabeth Moss with her, like, he's invisible.
Yeah, okay.
Shit.
That's fair.
And so what did you think of her acting?
I really was in on Elizabeth Moss. Like, I really felt like she cared about the character. To what extent, I don't know. But it really felt like she was trying. I think just the, what's the word? Ancillary? Is that the right word?
Ancillary? It depends on what you're going to say next.
That's a word, though.
It's pretty fantastic, am I right?
I have the best words.
I have the best words.
The minor characters, the B characters, and their little plots, which were pretty thin. I thought the way she interacted with them was kind of clunky, and maybe that's a writing problem or a directing problem.
I think going along with like the rest of the film, she had no chemistry with these characters.
Right. That's a good point.
And they didn't really have chemistry with each other either. So it felt like very cartoonish in how it was presented to us, of like father and daughter, they're obviously very close. Can you believe it? And then like she's this interloper in their life who's buying them lavish gifts as a result of her thing. And so I don't know, I just feel like the movie probably would have benefited, and her sister too, her tough-hearted sister.
I need your strength right
now.
Bad.
I just think that those characters probably could have been cut out. Maybe have someone who she's staying with, right? Like a reason for why she's in this place. But I don't know that they needed to be involved in the story, and it could have easily focused on the Invisible Man. And
I feel like you can have those characters for the same purpose, which is just to have people to kill and like kind of create more tension. But
yeah, I guess we do need a body count.
Just do it though. Don't try to like make them serious. This movie is about Elizabeth Moss. It's clearly her movie. Like, let her shine. Like, let's not like make her like she's cool with black people. She's giving them money and she lives with them, but it's not sexual.
What do black people love more than handouts? Am I right?
I'm not endorsing any sort of. I'm laughing at a different thing.
I have shamed myself. I have shamed my family. I have shamed you.
Where are you? Show yourself!
Surprise.
So like secondary characters aside, what did you think about Elizabeth Moss's acting? Because I felt like there were moments when it was really good, and those were generally the quieter moments of the movie, when she was, alone or reacting to this kind of blank space where we assume the Invisible Man may be. But when she was interacting with the other characters, it felt very cheesy, very forced, which could have been a script problem, just that the dialogue wasn't well written.
I think it is a script problem. I think they were rushing a lot of things, and they wanted to have these moments that were supposed to have a lot of weight, but the characters were kind of just saying, like, telling us how we're supposed to be feeling. Which is like, you've been such a good friend for us. You are such a good sister to me. And, I think, in a bad horror movie, in a schlocky, like, just popcorn munching movie.
More of a self-aware movie.
Yeah.
Than this movie was, because this movie took itself very seriously.
That would be fine, but this movie does take itself seriously, and it wants to be a more elevated film and say something more meaningful, which I think it tries to.
I almost thought, like, it wanted to be kind of like a Hereditary type movie, where like the actual horror elements of the movie are almost secondary to this very human horror that the characters have to deal with,
which I think is that's the benefit of the movie, and they should have played it up more instead of having the sci-fi element to it. And
right like the like hack lame lazy science of like, I don't know, it's a suit of cameras.
I don't
know, fucking figure it out.
Some 70-year-old Hollywood executives like Barton Fink, he's just like, oh, they're gonna love it. It's gonna be cameras everywhere. Kids have cameras.
The kids are gonna love it.
They've got 3 cameras on their phones. They're gonna have 3 cameras on their bodies. Adrian was a pretty bad character, and I think
horrible.
Speaks to the point of you not really feeling any impact of him as like a.
There was no menace in his performance in that last scene. There was no moment at which I was like, oh no, this guy, he's capable.
Like, get out, Elizabeth.
Get out
of that house.
Elizabeth.
Yeah. There was nothing there, and then the final dinner scene. There was no chemistry there.
I mean, the guy sitting next to me, I think, hit the fucking nail on the head here when he said "fucking douchebag" in regard
just
to
saw right through him.
Like, he was just a douchebag. Like, they're like in the most quintessential way that we call someone a douchebag, which is someone who's like a completely unself-aware, pretty boy, full of himself kind of asshole.
Maybe like the failure of the movie where you kind of build this guy up to be this genius, manipulative, powerful person who ultimately is just like, see-through. But I mean,
transparent.
That's a good show.
First, second season.
I haven't seen any episodes. My trans ally. I am. Adrian's bad, and I think the movie kind of really doesn't do enough, which is interesting. It doesn't do enough justice for him, his character. Like, to legitimize her.
Which I think goes back to my point that we should have seen more abuse. As repugnant as that statement is at its very core, we needed to see actual scenes of him imposing this violence and abuse on her in order to understand his threat, basically.
Well, the movie gets bad because we go away from the things that were working, which is Elizabeth Moss in rooms quietly. And, it's kind of like Ghost Story, where Casey Affleck is doing an amazing job of just standing.
I love that movie.
I love that movie too, but mainly because Casey Affleck is completely invisible.
I think that it was a brave choice on his part, for sure, to be covered.
You would have thought he got canceled right before that movie started filming.
Right.
Yeah, so like Adrian's not really a character. Elizabeth Moss is doing, so those things work. Like, and then you lose it when you can't really focus on Elizabeth Moss as an actor, where she's, in the rain and she's running around trying to find this guy shooting perfect shots at people.
With these cops that all know her name, or these security guards. Again, like, it was so silly for them to be like, Cecilia, don't.
Right. And I think those moments were taken away from, like, building more of, like, I guess this other person, which, in abuse, you have both elements.
It takes two to tango. As old and tired as that saying is, we understood her character very well. We understood her trauma, the result of her abuse. We understood that, but I think we also needed to understand the abuser as well, not to explain his actions away or to justify them in any way, but we needed to see it at least
from
a little
movie
bit from a movie perspective in order to understand what we should be afraid of. Which goes back to the whole invisible monster thing.
Yeah,
of like,
it's stuck between these two ideas of, like, if you want to make it a character drama about this person kind of processing her abuse, then you don't necessarily need that. You don't need to see Adrian be menacing all the time.
No, if the movie was centered on that.
Yes, right. So it's stuck between, I don't think the movie wanted to, like, spend too much time with him, because I don't think it wanted to be seen as, this movie's about him. Right. I think they were kind of a little too self-aware of, like, what this potentially could be read as. And so they're playing it safe. And, people are stupid. And so they'll just start reading it as, like, oh, well, Elizabeth Moss is she's not the center of the film about her abuse. And it's always about the men, and it's directed by a man.
It was a slippery slope. It was a tightrope that they were walking here in terms of satisfying the audience that was going to see something maybe a little bit out of the normal. Mm-hmm. In terms of, like, a movie that actually discusses abuse and trauma in, like, a somewhat real way. And then the people who want to come see, like, a good monster, a good horror film where, we can root against the villain and we can root for the protagonist.
Yeah, and you're shivering. You're like, ooh, when's the next jump scare gonna happen? I don't know.
Oh no!
Her hair got lifted.
36 frames.
Set.
And background. And action.
You want some water?
So, Josh, I know you're a fan of the two-part question, so I've got a two-parter for you here.
I love doing it a bunch of times.
I know you do. Will people see this movie, and should people see this movie?
Let me stop you there.
Let me stop you there. I'm so low, I see under the skirt of an ant. I don't get hot whatsoever, just run with so ant.
Will people see this movie? Now that I've answered it a bunch. I don't know. Will we ever get this?
Are you starting to second guess it now? The third time.
We should just do each episode 6 times, and then we'll get to the perfect episode.
The meat.
That'll be a weird social experiment. I think that people will go see this movie.
Do you think so though? Like it's gonna garner some positive word of mouth when considering the guy next to me left, or
he left 2 minutes early.
Yeah.
He couldn't stay for the final 2 minutes. I don't know. I talked to Hannah, my friend I met at the movies, and she said,
"Guy like you meets friends everywhere you go."
I asked her like what she thought, and she said, "Yeah, I was into it." I was like,
I heard her gasp a few times.
She gasped, she jumped, she laughed. It got her on.
She had an experience. Yeah. Something for everyone.
So I think, and Hannah, my good friend who I met at the movies, we love watching movies and just ripping them apart, like just making fun of them and how stupid they are. And
you mean the one movie that you've watched together?
Right.
Because
I can tell that we would do this more in the future.
Oh, okay, that makes
sense. Just based
on
our experience tonight.
That makes sense.
And so I can tell that her experience as positive is gonna maybe relay to the general audience, and who will be like, "Yeah, it's kind of stupid. This part was blah, 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 but it was fun. It was a good movie. You should go check it out. It was like kind of scary." And I think that's gonna be the I don't know if that'll actually get people to go see a movie in theaters, but I'm hoping it will, because I do recommend this movie, and I think that people should go see it.
Okay, fair enough.
What about you, buddy? What do you think?
I have my doubts as to whether this will garner the
Really?
kind of like word of mouth that it needs to.
This is new to me. Hearing this from you.
That it might need, because this is not a movie that had like a strong advertising campaign or anything.
No.
Lauren didn't even know what this movie was.
I should probably admit, I was on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was like deep in the Invisible Man promo, like all these accounts people who got like free tickets to go see it for the premiere, and it was so good. I can't wait for everyone else to go see it.
Which is like such a 2000s tactic. Yeah. It's like what they did with Blair Witch Project and
fucking bought it. I was
Paranormal Activity, where they had like the infrared video of the people in the theater being like,
right,
oh.
yeah. I was kind of like in the space of like, oh, maybe people are. I couldn't tell. I got tricked. I got bamboozled. Or at least I might be if people don't come see this movie.
It remains to be seen. I think that it would be good if this movie did well. I wouldn't be mad if it did, because I do think it tells something of a different story that is, an interesting take. Should they go see it? I'm not positive. This is like a must-see theater-going experience. The sound design's great. The cinematography's great. Good. But story-wise, like, I think there are parts you could potentially miss or zone out on and, like, look something up on Reddit. It's not riveting all the way through. So
yeah,
if you're wanting to go on a date with your best gal, she's got your leather jacket on, and you just want to go see a flick, then sure, go see Invisible Man. You know, there's way worse ways you could spend your money.
Totally. Absolutely agree. We are good friends.
We are indeed. Please like and subscribe. Please email us at tobehonestscast@gmail.com.
Yo, stop the record. Yo, if you've liked this episode and you really appreciate what we do and what we work on, like, go watch our other videos, like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Do all that stuff, but make sure you comment. Tell us what you want us to see. We are struggling to find movies to watch.
Shit, yeah.
Next up, we are watching the Marriage Story again. We just can't get enough of it. Marriage Story review number 2 coming out.
Part 2's coming out. We know you fucks love part 2s and 3s and 4s.
4 coming out of John Wick 3 part 4. Goodbye, guys.
Bye.
Not guys.
Facts.